Glad to see you this bright and early morning. I'm looking forward to some good and exciting news from each of our agencies. I want to go ahead and introduce myself as the new chairman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on General Government. I'm Amy Carter. I live in Valdosta, and I represent the 3 counties, part of Lowndes, all of Brooks, and part of Thomas counties. And I'm real excited about this new chairmanship and look forward to working with each and every one of you. I want, if you will, to allow me to have my committee introduce themselves. And we have our good senator here representing the Senate. Appreciate you being here. That's what we hear. All right, so we're going to start with Representative Barr. What number are you? 18.
Good morning, y'all. It is a pleasure to serve on this committee. I am a new member. My favorite job is being a dad and a husband, but I get to represent District 103, which is North Gwinnett County and South Hall County. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman.
Good morning. My name is Steve Allison. I have the privilege of representing the Georgia Mountains. I represent Union Towns, Raven County, and this is my 6th year on the General Government Subcommittee.
And we have a wonderful new analyst, and I will allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Tara Buchholt. I'm new to this committee as well, so it'll be fun.
Representative Dickey.
Hi, I'm Robert Dickey, and I represent 5 counties in central Georgia, and I'm glad to be here this morning and Vice Chairman of Chairman Amy Carter's General Government Committee. Thank you.
Chairman Smith.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lynn Smith. I'm from Noonan, Georgia. I have part of Carroll County and a large part of Coweta County, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you, and look forward to working with our new chair.
Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Chairman Carter. My name is Chuck Martin. I represent the 49th District in North Fulton County. The cities of Rawlsville and Alpharetta fall within the district. Actually, pardon me, but we changed that in the last thing. The cities of Alpharetta and Johns Creek fall within the district. Rawlsville is on the border, as is Milton. So we try to work together up there with our delegation to represent all of North Fulton. This is my 13th year in the legislature, my 11th on appropriations, and I believe my 5th with this committee. Chairman Carter.
Thank you. Glad to have the experience. And we have our Senate analyst.
Hi, my name is Daniel Biesel. I lost my voice, but this is my 2nd session, first one with general government, so I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Parsons. Just introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. I'm Don Parsons, a representative from Marietta, actually north central Cobb County, and I was actually the chairman of the subcommittee once upon a time. I think back when we first formed it back in 2000, what was it? 2005, yeah. Anyway, good to be here.
I'm glad I have someone to go to. Good. Chairman Bethel.
Thank you, Chairman. Charlie Bethel, I represent the 54th Senate District, which is all of Whitfield and Murray counties and portions of Gordon and Pickens counties. And as is the custom, we have to do it differently than the House, so we're divided differently. I am vice chairing our insurance subcommittee in the Senate, and also will be chairing the Insurance and Labor Committee in the Senate.
Thank you. And Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Hamilton, the 24th House District, which is the city of Cumming and part of Forsyth County. This is my 9th year down here, and I don't know how many on appropriations, quite honestly. And because he's different, that's why I choose to sit next to him, because I'm a little different too. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to get started with our agencies, and we'll begin today with the Department of Labor, Commissioner Mark Butler. Well, yeah, we're on page 132.
Good morning. This on?
That one?
Good morning.
I have all three pressed. What do you think?
Well, if it's not, I can talk really loud. How about that?
Sounds great.
Okay. First, what I'd like to do is kind of just briefly talk about the one change that's in this, and then kind of talk a little bit about the different sections, just kind of give you a little brief highlight for the big budgets and things that we're going to go into more in depth. You're going to see one change at the top of the page where you're seeing the transfer of the $201,000. All that is a program change, shifting to the proper program. We actually started doing this last year, but they didn't put the money with the program, so now we've got the money following actually the people that go with it. That's for child labor. We do a lot of child labor regulations and making sure that the companies are following that. The biggest thing you're seeing us do right now with child labor is with the movie companies. As everybody's well aware, we have a lot of movies that are coming in town, and we do a lot of certifications working with movie companies. We're working to streamline that process because it used to be it wasn't that big of a deal to kind of keep up with because there wasn't that many movies. Now there's so many, we're having to, with the staff that we have, come up with a better process. It used to be they had to send us the entire script for us to read, and now we're getting in and work with us and go, just send us the part where the kids are. And now we're looking at even doing something a little bit, streamline that because, when you're talking about 7 employees, that, with the deluge of movies we've had coming here, that's a lot to put on them to get through all that. But we think we've got it under control now to where we can get them serviced quickly and also making sure that these kids are not being put in bad situations. And so far we have not had any problems, and they've been really good to work with. So, and they've actually given us some really good ideas where Georgia might need to tighten up some regulations here and there, which is unusual to hear an industry tell you that maybe you're a little too loose, which is very unusual. So with that, just want to briefly, I know there's no changes on the rest of this, kind of give you a little highlight. One of the things that we always like to talk about every year has to do with the trust fund. Everybody's well aware of the issues we've had in the past with the trust fund, the fact that we had to borrow the money. We've seen federal FUTA taxes go up. If you did not see the press release back in May, that trust fund was paid off, and the last interest payments were paid off. Most employers have already gotten their notification that their FUTA tax went back to the normal amount, back down to $42 per employee. And even better news is, as of today, we have right at $470 million in the trust fund, which is significant because this is our lowest collection time of the year right now, and to have that kind of cushion to get us through the first half of the year means we won't be borrowing any money unless, knock on whatever you're supposed to knock on for finance, unless nothing, as long as the economy goes well, we should be good, borrowing no more money going forward. And we're projecting at the end of the year having somewhere between $750 and $800 million in the trust fund by the end of this year. Getting us well on our way to get to that $2.5 million that we need to have in that trust fund going forward based upon our projections of what our workforce is going to look like in the future to make sure that we don't get in that same trouble again. Made a lot of change in the Department of Labor the last 4 years. Some of you may not be aware. We've had to deal with some lean times with less money. We've trimmed our workforce back, and this is not including voc rehab or the transfers for WIA, but this is just traditional labor, what we've always had. We've trimmed it back by 32%, which equates about 650 positions, which is tremendous. Now, I will go ahead and tell you that we may have went a little too far on some of that because I've heard from some representatives and also from some senators around the state that some of our offices are a little understaffed, and we're looking to correct that. But we've also provided some new services, and I have to give a lot of credit to Senator Bethel and his community. They actually helped us come up with some really good ideas with some issues they had up that way with our new Special Workforce Assistance Team that came in their community and did a lot of work. And from that, we also grew another concept called customized recruitment, which is what you're going to be hearing about in the big budget. It's something that we looked at that other states were having issues with, we were having issues with. It was asked for and looked at by economic development. What it basically is in a nutshell is it's a new program that's unique to Georgia, where we work directly with economic development on new prospects. to help them with that initial recruitment for employees, and we use that as a selling point. And we know that it's having an effect because we're booked up through the rest of the year with a lot of the prospects. We work with economic development to help bring in these companies. And the really neat thing is we know that they're talking to other states about it. And I can give you like a kind of a quick story that happened to me the other day. There's one company that we've been working with economic development to bring to Georgia, and we presented customized recruitment, how we were going to help them staff up really quickly. And it was about a few weeks later, I was around my counterpart from South Carolina. And she asked me about customized recruitment. So I knew that the only way she knew about it was that company was talking to South Carolina also. And they were wanting to ask South Carolina, you know, what about their customized recruitment program? And so when she asked me about ours, I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. So may have heard of friendship there, but I'm not really going to give out secrets because it is becoming quite a draw, and it has really helped us with a lot of companies to bring them here to Georgia. But it's only for that initial recruitment to help them staff up, because a lot of these new companies, they don't have that relationship in those communities yet. You know, a lot of times when you have an existing company and they need to expand, they'll call somebody like Chairman Hamilton and get them to do that. Or, you know, a lot of times their employees are some of the best people to go out there and recruit new employees. So it's really helped us, and to work with economic development. It's really helped our communities grow, and we have a lot of projects going on right now.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Commissioner, you talked about enforcing these child labor laws. Are you enforcing, your department enforcing Georgia laws or federal laws?
Well, you have Georgia law, and then you have some federal law that we have to mirror. So it's a little bit of both. It kind of depends on what part of that you get into. If it's a wage and hour issue,
right,
we don't have a wage and hour
correct
enforcement division. By code we do, but it's never been funded. And there's been some talk about the possibility that it would be nice if Georgia had their own. Of course, I've also heard some people, and I've had a few people come to me and say we also ought to have our own OSHA division too. I see you shaking your head. I'm kind of like, well, if you decide to do that, please don't put it with the Department of Labor, put it with insurance. But anyway, it just depends. But, you know, we do run into that a lot. But if it's like an issue, like for example, we've dealt with some of the grocery store chains that have.
So you don't have a contract with feds to enforce some of their statutes and laws. You're just doing Georgia thing mainly.
Anytime it's doing the feds, is if we already mirror what they have in there.
Okay. I got one more question, if I may.
Please.
The 2.5 billion goal for the trust fund, how many years do you anticipate it might take? I know things can change, but
at the current rate that we're seeing right now with the improvement in employment, we've had, you know, you're going to hear about. I can't tell you about today, but you know, tomorrow you're going to see the rate that just come out. We're doing really well unemployment-wise. We've had a tremendous drop over the last 3.5, 4 months.
Great.
And had one of our better years growth. So you're probably looking at, in a hopeful side, I'm hoping 3 years, but it may be a little bit longer. Like I said, we're going to get close to $1 billion by the end of this year.
So you're hopeful we don't have another recession between now and then?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I had the crystal ball for that, it would be great. But, you know, like I said, if everything goes like it's planned, but it would be nice to see it, you know, in 3.5 years to get to that goal. We know we need to be at that number because we went back and we looked. Had there not have been the tax holiday that was put in the early 2000s, we would have had approximately about $2 billion in our trust fund at the time the recession hit. And had we had that amount, we would have never had to have borrowed money, and the lowest our trust fund would have ever gotten would have been about $500 million.
Well, how high was it before the recession?
It was right at $2 billion.
Right at 2. Okay. Thank you.
But now our workforce has grown. That's why we're saying 2.5, and it's continuing to grow.
I have a quick question about, I'm sorry, Ethan, about the child labor. is it that children who are under 18 have to get the work permit? Is the work permit done through your agency?
We are actually working on some, because that's one of those kind of things that really hasn't been very well. We're looking at changing that because it's cumbersome.
Yes.
The main thing is we want, we get complaints that the kid's not being treated right. We're going to, but the permit part has gotten cumbersome, and so we're working with Chairman Hamilton to take that permit process out, and we would hope that you would look upon that favorably because it's really just not effective anymore.
So how do you have these children on your radar if you don't have something like a work permit?
Well, I mean, we know that they're out there because with all the employers, they turn in when they send in their taxes, we know who the employees are. They send in their Social Security, their ages, and so we know they're out there. A lot of what we deal with is and this will actually help us tremendously. Instead of having to deal with all this paperwork, then we can actually do the good work of when we get complaints. And that's what it really comes down. And that's what we need to have these few individuals that we have in there to be able to focus them on when we get phone calls from where it could be parents, it could be, usually where it comes from is the parents saying, my kid works at so-and-so and they're doing this, they're doing that. I didn't think they could do that. Then we get those phone calls and then we can investigate. And so that's what we really need these individuals doing instead of shuffling paperwork.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Commissioner. Could you take a moment, well, two questions really. Our high school graduates, are we giving you the raw talent that you need to meet these jobs? And then secondly, just do a run through comparing customized recruitment versus quick start.
Both really good questions. Let's do the last one first.
You didn't give them to me either. I thought this was on my own.
If I was going to give you a question, I'd have gave you those two. Customized recruitment, we actually work very closely with Quick Start because, one of the issues, I'll give you an example. If you have a company that's coming, to Coweta County, and let's say that you work very hard and you get that company to come in there, it's a brand new company, and let's say that they're wanting to hire 100 people, and it takes them 6-8 months to fill those initial requests. That next prospect that you have that comes in there, if they always talk to these recent companies that locate, and if they see that people are having a hard time filling these positions, then they may not locate, and that puts us at a disadvantage. But now when they get the good stories that they're hearing now with this new program where we're working with Quick Start and economic development, where we're able to get them ramped up, instead of months, we're talking weeks. Then when that next prospect comes, they go, you won't believe what Georgia did for us. We were able to ramp up and get that initial recruitment done in, say 4 weeks or a month, and we got all 100 people that we need, and we were ready to go, and we started making money. Then that next prospect comes down, they hear that, that's a very favorable thing. And so we work with Quick Start to help them. And basically, and we'll go into a lot greater detail in the big budget because we do have an ask along with a request from economic development. They've also partnered with us to ask that we expand that program because they have a lot of activity going on, and we are stretched extremely thin right now, servicing all of these companies that are coming to Georgia. We go out there and you may see 1,700 applicants for 100 positions, and we can go in there and we can screen them and give them the best possible ones. So that way those companies are not wasting that time. In some cases, we've been able to save some companies $250,000, which is essential for Georgia to do, to show that kind of value, because we're not like other states. Like South Carolina, when they go and they do a recruitment, or Tennessee and they do a recruitment for a company, when they get to the end, they can actually throw cash at them. And we don't do that here in Georgia, where we don't write them a check. Okay? This is the way to where we can provide that same kind of value without having to write a check, when we can show that kind of value. And it gives us a competitive advantage.
Good. Thank you.
And your first question about the high school students, we're seeing some improvement on that. The main thing is, really what we're seeing right now is almost all companies across the board, they need more than just a high school diploma. As we've all seen, The jobs that we're seeing up here in Georgia need a higher level of skill. It's just like I was talking to a gentleman the other day that owns a large company, and he says, I used to, when I'd go out and I would hire forklift operators, all I needed was somebody that was a forklift operator. He says, nowadays, that same forklift operator needs to understand computers because of how the new the inventory process works, and a lot of times that stuff is built into the forklift, things like that. So it's a different ball game. And what we've done at Department of Labor is we've actually started working with the high schools a lot closer. We have a program called Georgia Best that some of y'all may be familiar with. It's a soft skills program, it's a certificate program, to where we teach these kids the value of the soft skills, things like work ethic, showing up on time, dressing appropriately, working well with others. And the program has grown significantly in the last 3 years. We started out in only 20 schools and pretty much stopped the recruitment because we was a pilot program. But then we started getting phone calls from chambers of commerce, other school systems that heard about it, and now we're in over 200 schools. And we've expanded that program to middle schools, and we're working on a program to help current employers teach onboarding and help people with those soft skills.
Thank you.
Any other questions by the committee members? All right, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the Office of the Commission of Insurance, Commissioner Ralph Hudgens. And our CFO, Chris Walker. And I think maybe that mic, if you just pull it a little closer to you.
The red light. Excuse me, the red light's not on. So
Yeah, we think it's on.
No, it's okay. Is it on? Okay. All right. Well, I am Ralph Hudgens, and I served with Don Parsons and Lynn, and the rest of y'all are newcomers. But I did serve in the House till y'all ran me off, and then I ended up in the Senate till they ran me off, and now I'm the insurance commissioner.
And we're starting on page 123. I'm sorry, committee.
That's right.
And Commissioner. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. It's a pleasure to be here, but I don't particularly like what I'm going to say. I don't like what I see here in the fact that, well, I do with the Department of Insurance. Y'all are leaving me alone, and that's been my motto, just, leave me alone. But I don't particularly like what I see here in the Fire Safety Division. I'm also, my title is Commissioner of Fire Safety and Insurance. And so here you're talking about a $622,000 cut. And the reason I think that they proposed this cut is the fact that we have a cooperative agreement with the federal government to inspect all the mobile homes that are manufactured here in Georgia. And they pay us a certain amount per floor that we inspect, whether if it's a double wide, then we get 2 fees for a double wide. If single wide, we get 1. They're starting to even now build some of these manufactured housings that have a second, a second floor, so we get the fees there. And through the years, we've been able to accumulate the money from these floors because we've been able to do it cheaper than what they're willing to pay us. So this has become reserve is what we call it, and we really need it because February is when they pay us, but that we don't have any more appropriations from the state until July. And so or from July to February, we have to dip into this money to pay our inspectors that are performing this service. It gets us the reimbursement from the federal government. Currently, we have 6 mobile home manufacturers operating in Georgia. Several of them had been closed, but because the economic conditions are coming up and they're able to sell more mobile homes, some of these have reopened, and then all of them are producing more than what they had been producing. This year we have one more that is opening. They're scheduled to open, and we do the figure last year was 8,507 inspections, plus we did those were the ones on the mobile homes that were actually being manufactured, and the manufacturer can't sell that until we put our seal on it saying that it's been inspected. And so if we get cut this money and we have to reduce the number of inspectors, we're not going to be able to sell, or they're not going to be able to sell them. We've also inspected last year over 3,000 inspections at retailers to make sure that they're not selling anything that isn't properly tagged with the federal tag. And then we've had some consumer complaints that we have to deal with. If a retailer sells a mobile home and a consumer complains about it, then we have to go and check it out and make sure that it's up to spec. So we're going to be hurt there if we get this $600,000 taken away from us. We're also going to be hurt in the fact that we are in the process of agreeing for a new GFERS program, which is a Georgia Fire Incident Reporting System, and this is a new database that will connect all the fire departments and the state with us, where they can report every fire, because they have to report every fire now, but they're supposed to statutorily, but only 40% of them are doing it because they say, well, it's just it's too much trouble, and we don't have any way to reprimand them or penalize them for not reporting it. And so this new GFERS program will allow them, they can do it through a smartphone. They could just be able to report fires. They can report the training that they've received, so the individuals can keep certified. We can keep track of the pensions, the firefighter pensions, and we can also have the reports that we need to make to FEMA. So if this $600,000 is taken away from us, and they're also talking about another $300,000 in next year's budget, this program that we are in the process of agreeing, we hadn't pulled the trigger and signed the contracts, but this is going to go out the window. We're not going to be able to have that to help the firefighters in the state of Georgia. So I don't know where the money that was taken from us, where it went, but I sure would love to have it back, because this is really going to hamper our fire safety efforts in the state of Georgia. So with that, I guess I'll get up off my knees and ask you all to and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Since we know that the governor's office never makes mistakes, did I say that right, Ms. Floor Leader? Anymore? It used to be. So you think this is just a misunderstanding thinking? I mean, I read very clearly the wording right here says that the money is available through the prior federal funds. So you're saying that's just not the case? Is that what you're saying?
No, we'll still be getting federal funds. Or is it a timing issue then? It's a timing issue, but it's the fact that not only do we need to pay this year $400 and something thousand for this new program that we would like to buy with.
But that's 2016. That's a 2016.
No,
the database. The database you're talking about, the 2016 ask, right? It's not presently budgeted.
The database is what we were going to buy with this.
So you were going to use funds from a federal program that's used for fire marshal activities for inspecting trailers, but you're going to turn around and use that to buy a database. That I would have thought that the federal funds should be used for the inspection of the trailers. Maybe I missed something. misunderstood that. I'm trying to be argumentative.
I'm Chris Walker. Thank you, Representative. What the commissioner was saying, these funds, if they're eliminated from our budget, these are state fund eliminations being contemplated or recommended by the governor. If they're eliminated from our budget, it's going to force us to cannibalize state funds within the safety fire program to keep manufactured housing afloat, which would in turn eliminate the system that the commissioner is discussing.
So these are state funds. All right. Go ahead.
Being eliminated because of the fact that there are federal funds associated with the program. The chief concern with the federal funds and why they're sitting there as a reserve or why they're carried forward each year as a reserve, and the commissioner alluded to this program, the reimbursements do not come in until February of the fiscal year. So we've had to run from July until, well, we still haven't gotten them yet. So we have to have a way, cash flow wise, to run the manufactured housing program. Once we eliminate that reserve, we don't have the cash flow. And the normal allotment process would not be there for it.
Is that Chairman Martin?
Thank you, Chairman Carter. Let me ask Mr. CFO, at the end of the last fiscal year, FY14, did you return any money to the state at the end of your budget? Did you spend it all?
No, we didn't spend every penny of our state funds, and I'm assuming you mean on the whole.
But absolutely. Do you know how much you returned to the state treasurer?
I don't right offhand. I'm just going to say probably around $150,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get at with Chairman Hamilton here is this committee has, over the years, budgeted you money, state funds, to pay for the fire marshals, to inspect the manufactured homes. And then we contemplate that in your budget, that you get the money back from the feds. And the commissioner said you actually make a profit doing that. I mean, you inspect them for less than the reimbursement is. That's what I heard the commissioner say. Is that a true statement or no?
Well, it's federally. I mean, it's the reimbursement covers the inspections. When you look at the program budget for safety fire, there's not a line item or a designated area that says this is state fund appropriations for manufactured housing. We've been funding that program out of the reimbursements historically. Well,
okay, well that makes sense. I mean, the feds are reimbursing us
sure.
for doing that inspection, so you'd fund that. That would make sense. I won't belabor the committee because first day here, and I'm interested in finding if the chair lady will so allow more information on this. But what confuses me, two things confuse me, and perhaps I don't remember it from last year. In general, if you're going to spend money on a database, it may be God's work that is good, and the commissioner seemed to think it was, something that would make it better for state firefighters around, and I think the committee would support that. But in general, when you're going to make that kind of expenditure, it comes with software maintenance, and somebody's going to come back and tell us that you use more data, so somebody's going to want to charge you more, or you're going to have all these charges. Generally, that's something that's appropriated through this body and our colleagues across the hall. You don't cannibalize money on your own. Now, if I missed that last year, I apologize, but did I miss that, or is that just an initiative you were going to fund from within the department, and this committee wouldn't have known about it if that $600,000 hadn't come out?
Anything that we had done in that realm, Representative, would have gone through the full DOAS, GTA process.
DOAS isn't elected by the state taxpayers to do this. If you're going to fund a new program, that database is a new program that taking this money away is causing you to cannibalize something that the taxpayers are counting on you to do. And it may be a good one. We may be supportive of it across the committee here, but what bothers me here is if this hasn't come up, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and perhaps Chairman Carter would be holding a meeting in January 2016 when you're asking for data because the GTA is coming back telling us more. That's what bothers me. So you may have all the right, I do think you have all the right intentions, but I think in order to get this together, me personally, I'd like to see where it all glues together, where the reimbursement ties into, and just what shape this is. And if we have a database we need to buy, I'd like to see a line item in the budget that this committee and our Senate colleagues sign. I'm sorry, Chairman Pruitt's head's in my way. I'm not making eye contact with you. It's It's not your fault. I just wanted to look at the gentleman while I was talking. Does that make sense?
No, sir. I understand absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I need to get a clear understanding too, the best I can, which I probably won't, but it's not your fault, it's mine. Are you losing any state funding, or is it all federal funds?
This would be state funding.
All right,
that
so
we're losing.
do you have matching federal funds that comes along with that state funding that you're going to lose also?
Well, what it would entail is two things. One, to the extent that we go past this 600,000, as would be recommended in the 2016 budget, the program would be eliminated, and that elimination would take in excess of $300,000 annually that we're putting into the state treasury via collections from the program.
From the federal? I mean,
From the state,
okay.
From collections associated with the program, not federal money. No, sir. We would utilize the federal money to support the program, to run the program. So what's happening is they're taking an amount of state funds out of our budget commensurate with the federal funds that we have in our budget to run the program. And the problem, where we run into the problem is if you take the state funds and we are left now filling the gap with federal funds, we don't get those federal funds until
I understand, to a later date. So
yes,
it's a
sir.
cash flow. It's a cash flow issue more than anything else, is
yes,
what you're saying.
As much as a funding, it's
But you
absolutely
also are building up a reserve, and if you build that reserve up to a point, at some point in time, it would not be a cash flow issue because you would have the reserve. But you're going to use the reserve. Your plans to use the reserve is to buy this new software system, or is that correct?
In answer to your question, to be as direct as possible, I don't believe the commissioner was saying we were planning to use the federal manufactured housing funds for the system. I think what he was saying is this reduction puts us in a position where we wouldn't otherwise be able to fund the fire safety system.
Okay. Well, how many years would it take you to get that reserve up to a point to where you could fund it without having a cash flow issue?
Well, without the reduction, you know, I'm guessing it takes roughly $600,000 to run this program annually. And when I say run it, that's open the doors, turn on the lights, and do the bare bones minimum. It's not buying systems and improving technology or anything like that.
Right.
So if you figure that we would get somewhere in the neighborhood of a $600,000 reimbursement in February, assuming that reimbursement rate held true from the feds, I would still say it takes $400,000 of that 1.2 million. If we bring $600,000 into the fiscal year, we're going to spend roughly $400,000 of that by February.
So you're talking 2 years, 3 years to get to a point where you could...
I would say a couple of years at least.
Okay. The second question is, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I know, and I'm assuming that y'all met with the governor back in probably September. No, you didn't?
We didn't this year, no, sir.
Okay. So have you had a chance to explain this situation to the governor or his staff?
No, sir, we have
Okay.
not.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think now I have a better understanding, but I just want to make sure I get the issue here. If I hear you right now, you're saying that this money coming out, the opportunity cost of that is this other program, that you would forego it to ensure that this program continues. It's not that you're planning on making that expenditure with these funds. It's you're planning on, if these funds go away, you're going to take funds that you already have planned to spend on some other program.
I would say they're taking state funds, and so we're going to have to basically replace that with these federal funds.
Any other questions by the committee? All right. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. And next up, we have the State Board of Workers' Comp with Frank McKay. And We're on pages 200 and 201.
Madam Chair and House and Senate committee members, we're pleased to be here. I am Frank McKay. I'm the chairman of the State Board of Workers' Compensation, and seated to my right is Tom Risco, our chief financial officer, who has a very long tenure with the state of Georgia, 47 years. I think he's now the longest tenured full-time state employee, and he's been at the State Board of Workers' Compensation since 67. So we have a wealth of experience that we rely upon, which has benefited me as coming in as a fairly new chair of the State Board of Workers' Compensation system. I do have a little bit of good news I'd like to share at the outset, if I may. We're not requesting any change to our fiscal year 2015 budget, and that's a good thing. And the dollars that actually come into the workers' compensation budget come really from outside taxes, outside state treasury raised funds, but through assessments. We assess all the insurance companies that write workers' compensation insurance in Georgia, and also primarily the larger employers that are self-insured. They're proportional amount if they were insured. And so they're assessed. And we were able to actually lower our assessment for 2015 as compared to 2014 it's a 1.18% assessment on the amount of those premiums to the insurance companies. And in fiscal year 2014, it was 1.25%. And I would like to point out that in comparison to our neighboring states, and most of the states in the country that have a similar type funding for a workers' compensation board, of which all 50 states have a workers' compensation program, we're one of the very lowest as far as that amount of that assessment. Most of the other states are in anywhere from 2-point-something% to 3-point-something to as high as 6 or 7%. So we look pretty good there. Another bit of good news that we have that's sort of related to the assessment is Georgia relies upon the National Council on Compensation Insurance, NCCI, which makes insurance rate recommendations to Mr. Hudgens in the insurance department, who was just here immediately before us, regarding all the different types of insurance, whether it's liability insurance, automobile insurance, or workers' compensation insurance. And they recommended a 3.3% decrease this year to the Georgia employers that purchase workers' compensation insurance. And it's a 3.3% overall decrease, and certain industries get a little bit higher or lower percentage decrease based on that. So that's a bit of good news. Budget-wise, we're in good shape at this point, midway through our 2015 budget. We are in the middle of a multi-million-dollar computer technology program that we're working on, and we look like we're in good shape on that. Any questions, Madam Chair?
Any questions? Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank, how you doing? Good to see you. I should know the answer to this question, but I hadn't thought of it until you made a comment. When you said you reduced it from 1.25 to 1.18, I know there's discussions over in the subsequent injury trust fund and everything. Is there no link whatsoever? Are those completely separate, or in other words, we've potentially saying we reduced it here, but then there's some potential long-term liability in the trust fund. Is there no linkage there at all, or do they have to remain completely separate?
As far as I know, there is no linkage there. That our assessment for our budget is strictly premium-based. And then in the Workers' Compensation Act, there's several sections that outline the formula for the subsequent injury trust fund, which was ended in July.
Are the same people paying into both funds?
Yes.
Then is it not logical to say why are we reducing one when we have a potential deficit in the other?
And that's the part that I think are two completely separate things. Our operating budget for the state
Okay.
workers' compensation and then the subsequent injury trust fund, which operates as a separate agency.
But the same people are paying it based on a premium base, though, right?
Ours is based on premium. The SITF formula is based on payout of claims.
Okay, all right.
All payout on claims.
I figured there had to be
There's a
some.
formula that's applied to how much is paid out in a calendar year, and then their assessment is based on that for the next year. That's how they come up with their assessment. And there is some current discussion about that formula, as you may know.
And that's why, that was just a piece that I hadn't ever thought of, is if they could be linked. Thank you.
And right now, they're not. They're separately.
Leader Dickey.
Thank you. So I want to understand this too, Chairman Hamilton. This percent of premiums just pays for the administration of your department and that sort of thing, right? Correct. So you lowered the percent. Did you change the number of personnel in your office? What changed with the operation of your department in corresponding with lowering the assessment?
And I want to answer that, and then Tom, you correct me if I'm wrong. In part, is because not so much within our department. We're pretty much staying about the same, but as we're coming out of the recession, we're seeing this increase in jobs and increase in businesses located in Georgia, the expansion, so that the amount of insurance premium has risen back about equal to where it was in 2010. It's almost like, when you go back to late 2007, 2008, it's almost like a bell curve. When we entered the recession, 2010 kind of bottoming out, and it's been coming up ever since. The insurance premiums have followed that.
Correct.
It's almost a mirror of the loss of jobs, the loss of the construction industry, of course, Northwest Georgia, the loss of the carpet industry. You saw insurance premiums coming down, and they're coming back, and they're about up almost equal to where we were going into that recession. So that means that the premiums are higher, there's more dollars, we can get the same dollars at a lower percentage.
Okay, so you don't carry over money. I mean, you change this rate every year depending on the amount of money flowing in to your for this.
We do not carry over dollars from year to year.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So how often do you adjust this rate?
It's not that we're adjusting it. It's based on what the total premiums calculate out to be each year.
Okay.
So we're dividing the total premiums, which is $1,800,000,000,
right,
into whatever our budget is. We've been our budget's been about the same for the last several years, but in the last few years, the premiums have increased, like Chairman was saying. So it's bringing down the factor.
Any other questions by the committee? Thank you both.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Next is the Department of Audits and Accounts. We're on page 31 in our books. Okay, he's coming up. That's Chuck Williams. He's just here with us. Page 31. At 31 through 33. Yep, 33. Mr. Griffin.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Greg Griffin. I am the State Auditor with the Department of Audits and Accounts, and with me today is Carol Schwinny, our Director of Administration.
Good morning.
So we're on page 31 of the Governor's Report. As you can see there, we have a total budget of about $34 million, which is substantially comprised of state funds, almost $33.5 million. And we have several program or focus areas that our dollars are allocated to, primarily to our audit and assurance division, which is where we conduct most of the audits from. We Regarding the amended fiscal year 15 budget, if you look at the column, change column, we are not requesting any additional funds. In the amended, what you see there in those amounts, those reflect a reallocation of additional funds that we received in last year's appropriation that were placed in the one program, and we're reallocating those funds to the programs where the actual expenditures are going to occur. As you may recall, those additional funds there were personal services funds for recruitment and retention. We certainly appreciate those funds from last year. We have seen some benefit already this year. Our turnover rates are lower currently compared to last year, and also I believe we have been able to retain a number of key personnel that would likely have left for other opportunities outside the state. So I do appreciate those funds. And with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for the work you do. I actually talked to somebody in your office yesterday about the state expenditure report, the confusing document that it is with all those dates and fiscal years. Doing that. So what's the changes you reflect? Just to be clear, is not here at mid-year you hiring people that you didn't plan to hire, or having expenses you didn't plan. It's just the money was when the big budget was approved, it was put in the wrong drawer.
For expediency purposes, it was put in the one program.
Yes, sir.
And then we reallocated to where the actual.
Just want to be clear on that. Thank you very much.
Let's see, who is that? Representative Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I am just familiarizing myself with the proceedings and looking into what y'all do, on your purpose statement about middle of the way through, it says to conduct performance audits and evaluations at the request of the General Assembly. And just out of curiosity, and maybe some of my colleagues could help me out, is that any General Assembly member? Is that at a request of a chairman? How does that exactly work, just for my info?
The process, usually at the end of each session, we get a request from the House Budget Office and the Senate Budget Office to perform a number of special examinations. So typically it would be funneled through those committees and those chair.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you this afternoon.
I also do. We need to recognize our state senators, especially that chairman down there. Chairman Heath, would you like to make any comments? What number are you? 15.
I was just trying to fly under the radar.
All right, and we have Senator Orrock here with us. Thank you. And Jimmy Pruitt. Thank you, Chairman. No, very clear. Thank you. All right, Department of Banking and Finance. We're on page 57. Mr. Hagler.
Good morning.
Good
Thanks for
morning.
having me here today, and thank you for both groups agreeing to meet together. That's a huge relief and benefit to me personally. Our budget for the amended year is flat, so I thought, since I'm not sure that I've had the opportunity to meet everyone, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the department and what we do. Again, Kevin Hagler. I've been with the department for 18 years. Had the honor of becoming commissioner in July of 2013, so serving in that capacity since then. We regulate state-chartered banks and credit unions primarily. In the state of Georgia, we dominate the space in terms of regulation. Of the banks chartered in Georgia, say 175 are ours. There's another 40 or so that are nationally chartered. Banks that we regulate include SunTrust, Synovus, United Community Bank, as well as a number of smaller community banks that are really represented in each of your communities. We also regulate state-chartered credit unions. We probably have a little less than half of the portfolio of institutions of that nature in the state. Again, just some examples, some that are quite large. Delta Community Credit Union, Georgia Zone, Associated, Atlanta Postal. Just for reference, Delta Community Credit Union is $4 billion in assets, so it's larger than probably 95% of the banks that are in the state of Georgia. We also regulate 8,000 or 9,000 collectively non-depository entities such as money service businesses like check cashers, money transmitters, seller of checks, mortgage loan originators, mortgage brokers, and those folks. One thing that makes us very unique amongst banking departments throughout the country is in 2012, the legislature passed a merchant acquirer limited purpose bank charter. It's a mouthful. And what that does is, I don't know, I guess I wasn't aware at the time, but merchant acquiring is a huge industry in Georgia. Payment systems is. About 70% of all electronic transactions run through Atlanta. These are companies like Global Payments, First Data, TSYS. It's a huge industry that stays largely off the radar screen. Those entities have to have sponsorship by a large institution, typically to gain access to Visa and MasterCard to do business. That creates two problems. One, they pay quite a bit for the privilege of running through a large bank. And also, large banks, their interest in conducting that business can ebb and flow, and so you have a business continuity risk of someone not wanting to be in that business. Again, that was passed in 2012. We spent most of 2013 working on the rules and regulations that go with that. It's a completely new industry, a new charter, and that charter would allow these entities to get direct access to Visa and MasterCard. Did our rules writing, had that ready at the end of 2013, and then there was a little bit of a lag, but then in September of this year, Credirex became our first applicant for an MALPB charter. It's an Israeli-based company that does business in Europe through the Payment Systems Directive. There is regulated by Malta, though they do have a headquarters that they function out of primarily in the Boston area. So when they applied in September, we did an investigation, asked them for an exhaustive amount of information. Our examiners went up and did a review, and then on December 12th, with a lot of conditions, we gave approval to that charter, so to be the first approval in the country for that type of charter, something that we're very excited about. Now it's just kind of a wait and see to see if they've got a year to gain access to Visa or MasterCard and begin processing those payments. We can extend that if necessary, but we're very anxious to see them start that business and take that charter to fruition. I know when that legislation was going through, there's a lot of talk about that being a jobs bill, and if Credirex is able to do business, that absolutely will be the case. By law, they're required to have a minimum of 50 jobs moved to the state, and we would expect that to be somewhere in the probably Sandy Springs perimeter area, because that is what you refer to as transaction alley for these type of companies in Georgia. So very exciting piece for us right there. Overall, the banking industry is doing much better, though our work is still pretty stout. As I mentioned, we had 175 banks. 33% of those were what we consider problem institutions, meaning that we have them rated as a 3, 4, or 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the best. So a lot of institutions that we're looking at. Now that number has come down from 38% at the beginning of the prior year, and at the peak in 2010, we were at 65% of our portfolio. So it shows you kind of how troubled the economy was in Georgia and how far we've come, but it is largely stabilizing now. A lot of cleanup work to do still, but 88, 89% of the banks in Georgia are profitable, which is a great place to be. And this means a lot to all of us in the room, in that community banking is the best source of small business lending countrywide, and that is where our economy will come back from, is the smaller companies. I know that the big, Mercedes moving to the area and stuff are great stories and are great reflection on the state, but when it comes to each of us individually, it's really the small businesses being formed organically that is really going to make the biggest difference. I'll just kind of wrap up with the budget last year. Y'all were extremely generous in allocating an extra $184,000 to us. I know that's a bit of a rounding error in some of these hearings that you'll sit through, but that was huge for us. We had in our examiner workforce probably 30% turnover ratio in that group. Currently, half those folks are what we call in training status even today. But moving the financial examiner, senior financial examiner salaries up a good bit has really helped stem the tide. You know, I've probably got 24 people working at the Federal Reserve right now. I'm going to prepare a coup so we can just take it over. But it's really changed the perspective of these new folks coming on instead of, you know, I've got to get my experience up and then move on somewhere else to, you know, staying and working for the state of Georgia, which, again, we don't compete on salary with the federal government. It's the entire package, and it's a great place to work. We have the ability to make a lot more decisions than our federal counterparts do. So I'll stop rambling at this point and see if y'all have any specific questions for me.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions. One is, obviously, I see what your budget is today, and I know that we increased your budget tremendously back in probably 2009 and 10 when everything hit the wall. What was your budget prior to us hitting the wall? Do you remember?
I don't remember in hard dollar figures. The governor's office, as well as this committee, were very kind to us during the hard times in that our cuts were less than some other agencies. It was tough, though, because our workflow at least triple what it was prior to that. Hard dollars, I'm not sure. If you look at positions, though, I think in 2006 we had 148 positions, and we're currently at 102 now. I'm not here to beg for more positions. I think when I talk to my staff, they would rather have fewer positions but have them paid better to maintain the expertise.
Well, if I had a job there, I'd want more pay too, probably.
Well, what's happening is these folks are they're trying to do their day job as well as train half the staff.
I guess what I was trying to get at is that if we go back to the budget to what it was before the bad times, and certainly we gave you some extra dollars to work with, or didn't cut you as much, I don't know, without going back and looking. But will we ever get back to that point to where dollars per bank, or however how you want to divide it, will be equally the same? And then the other thing I'd ask is that I'm glad that the banking is getting better, and certainly rural banks, but I am really concerned about the fact that rural banks are having a really hard time loosening up and making loans, and that really concerns me. Do you see any changes in that in the future?
It's tough. You know, at the state, we're always very conscious about adding laws and regulations that increase that burden. A lot of our changes that we propose are, I'm not saying lessen the burden, but just make it smarter and more laser focused. What most of the industry is terrified right now of is the Dodd-Frank Act, which is supposed to be leveled at the largest institutions that really caused the biggest problem. And by large, I'm talking about the Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, Chases, those folks that had mixed investment banking as well as traditional. You get this trickle down of regulations and best practices that have a lot of the folks in the rural areas concerned, particularly the mortgage proposal that has to underwrite mortgage loans to a certain standard to be accessible in the secondary market, and if you don't write it to those standards, then you run the risk of being sued and losing all your interest in such that you had in those loans. And you know, what we do is, I belong to the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, our national organization, and what we try to do is push for, you know, those banks that are holding those loans on their books. You know, obviously they have taken a true underwriting risk and are absorbing that risk. You know, leave them out of that. This really needs to be focused on the folks that were just generating these loans and then selling them into the secondary market. So I know I'm not answering your question directly. It's tough out there right now in terms of lending. If you're a borrower, it's a great place to be. The pricing is really low. Our banks are having trouble. You know, it's a stealing somebody's lunch kind of game right now. If you want to grow, you're basically refinancing somebody else's business or taking it away from somebody else. So, and it's just a lot of the business and economy isn't there to really support a lot of lending currently.
Well, one last comment, Madam Chair,
Sure.
if I could. What I'm hearing from the people is that the only people can get a loan are the people who don't need it. That the banks are just really, really tight with their money. And I even asked a banker the other day, if you had a piece of property that was worth X amount of dollars and somebody wanted to borrow only 20% of what that value of that property was, would you make the loan? And he said no. He said, we don't make loans on real estate. So I don't know, and maybe we ought to have a sideline talk, because I'm trying to figure out exactly, the banks are begging to make loans. They have money and they need to make loans, but either they can't make them or they're scared to make them, and I'm not sure how to find those answers. But thank you.
I would love to get together and talk more about that. And I do think you had banking in general in Georgia was heavily real estate dependent, and that's the source of basically all of our problems here. We lost 89 banks in Georgia over the last 5 or 6 years. So rightfully so, folks are having to deleverage that portfolio in particular. What they're really looking for is owner-occupied commercial real estate lending and things of that nature. Speculation on land and land development is a lot harder to come by, because a lot of them still have more than they probably should in a prudent underwriting standard. As far as our exams go, we take a look to see what their exposures are and that the underwriting is done appropriately and the proper judgment and processes in place, but we don't dictate to them specifically what they should and shouldn't lend to.
I'm sorry, it brings up one more question,
Go
if you
ahead.
don't mind. Well, aren't local banks, they're there to help small communities, and there are a percentage of risk factors that they're supposed to give some loans at some risk to meet the audit criteria, are they not?
I think you may be alluding to CRA, the
Right.
commercial, the consumer. As a state commissioner, we don't really enforce
Okay.
those specific regulations. We focus more on safety and soundness. But,
All right. Thank you.
Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you. Quick question, and I really know very little about this, so and you may or may not be the right person, but it's my understanding that that on tax foreclosures, that I've been told that this has become, there's somewhat of a little cottage predatory industry out there because of a 20% premium ability, that there can bid prices up at the courthouse steps with the intention of pocketing 20% of the price. Do you hear from any banks or in regard to that? Is that something that's ever been on your radar?
It's not something I'm particularly familiar with. I can promise you that all the banks that I look at, when they're foreclosing on properties, they're losing money.
Right. Well, and this is not money going to the bank. This is the money that ultimately the property owner and the bank have to pay because of how it's done is what I understand. And it's typically done in many of these cases when the property owner was not notified or they didn't receive notification. And so in the cases that have been presented to me, they were surprised. But you're not aware of that, then?
No, I'm not aware
Thank you.
of that. It must be done outside the banking group.
Senator Orrock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. That was an interesting sidebar that you took us on with Credirex and that new development. What is that piece of the industry called? What's
that is merchant acquiring. I'm sorry, I was really glossing over there and probably created a lot more confusion than any help. What that does is when you or I use our credit card at Home Depot or Target, any of these companies get that transaction, from us through the Visa MasterCard network, and then get the money for the retailer. So they're the facilitator of the transaction.
so they're acquiring on behalf of the merchant,
Yes,
is the point. And just one other question I had in that regard. You referenced that they're required by law to have 50 employees in the state. Could you direct us to which set of laws you're talking about that requires that?
Yes, it's I think it's 7-4. No, sorry, 7-1, and then can I email that to you?
Well, yeah, the point is it's a state law.
Yes, ma'am.
That requires, and on the basis of what do they have to have 50 employees? I mean, what? Tell us what the law is. Yeah.
Simply state statute. Like I said, I think the idea was to encourage entities to, if they're not already here, to encourage them to relocate to Georgia if they're going to use this merchant acquiring limited purpose bank vehicle to do business with Visa and MasterCard. The employment requirements get a little fuzzy in that it depends on, if you have 50 primary employees or if you have 250 folks that are in the related industry doing business with you, but the idea is to have a presence here in Georgia. Those entities that are already here, if they were to choose to go through this route, they would easily meet the requirements of law, but folks like Creditex who relocate or need to relocate and have some type of entity here with employment.
So is this law that governs financial institutions that you oversight? Is that?
Yes, in 2012 there was a new code section that was created, specifically for the merchant acquirer limited purpose bank charter. It's tagged, section 7-1 is the banking code, of course, and
right.
It's added into that section.
Thank you. That was just when you mentioned having to bring jobs with your operation. It was interesting to hear a bit more about that, learn a bit more about that. Thank you.
Sorry I wasn't more articulate on that.
No. Thank you.
Chairman Martin. 25. Who's that? Chairman Smith. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner. In the past, your committee has provided us with sort of a chart or spreadsheet of the different categories that you regulate and then the number of employees that you use for each category. So I think that breakdown might help us see where your energies are going. I know it would help me for sure. And there are a lot of other categories we're not talking about, like title, your title loans and that type of thing, paycheck cashing services. You regulate all of those, don't you?
Much of that, and I'd be happy to send everybody on the committee some kind of document to make that clearer.
It would, thank you.
Bank and credit union regulation is our meat and potatoes. That's 62 examiners out of 69. That is most of what we do. The non-depository side is kind of our catch-all, where our check cashers, check sellers,
right.
Money transmitters, mortgage loan originators, mortgage brokers. Things like industrial loan groups, the small loans, that is under the Commissioner Hudgens area in insurance. Title pawn is not regulated to my knowledge or by a different agency. Payday lending is not allowed in Georgia by law, so it's not specifically regulated. One new addition that's being discussed, I think, in the legislature this session again is debt settlement, which would allow those folks that try to settle debts for consumers. I think we've been tagged as the agency that would oversee that if that goes through as proposed. But again, that's not currently in law.
Thank you. I just think it'll help us all to see some kind of chart. Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for having us.
Okay. Next up, Governor's Office of Consumer Protection. We got somebody. Okay, I think we're on page 109.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm John Sowers. I'm the Administrator of the Governor's Office of Consumer Protection. I don't have much to say about the budget. It's small. There's a small deduct in there which I will address in a moment if I may, but first I'd like to take the opportunity to report to you. We issued yesterday the required annual report for 2014, which we're mandated to do. And I'm pleased to indicate to you that that report shows that we produced last year total economic benefits for the people in the state of Georgia of approximately $45 million, which is an increase of about 45% over the previous year and a record number. That was accounted for by several things, the biggest of which was that the lemon law, which we administer, saw an amazing amount of activity last year. Fees received from dealers increased by several $100,000 to a number in excess of $900,000. The number and amount of settlements increased dramatically. We did not have very many more mandatory arbitration proceedings, just a great deal of voluntary settlements by manufacturers. We had a very busy year. We received over 21,000 inquiries and complaints from consumers. The biggest single category of complaints that we received, and this is true every year, had to do with abusive debt collection practices, over 12,000 such complaints. A typical complaint, and maybe there's nothing that's totally typical, but what often occurs is organizations go out and purchase debt on the secondary or tertiary market. They pay 1, 2, 3, 4 cents on the dollar for it, and then harass people to pay it. If they collect 10% or 5% of what they've purchased, they're miles ahead of the game. So it's very common for consumers to receive calls threatening them with arrest, imprisonment, bankruptcy, or any number of things if they don't make a payment immediately or by a certain date and time and so forth. What's distressing is the knowledge, which is entirely anecdotal on my part, but I'm sure it's true. We don't learn about every single instance of that kind of activity, but we do learn enough of it that we're able to make some dent in the problem. But it is a horrific problem. There are other problems, of course, that recur. We administer and enforce other acts, the Debt Adjustment Act being one, and a couple of others. But probably 80% of our activity occurs with respect to the Fair Business Practices Act, which was the reason that our agency came into being back in 1975 to begin with. So it was a very busy year. I have copies of our report. I'd like to leave one with you, if I may, Madam Chairman. I think we may have enough for anybody who wants one. If we don't, we'll be glad to furnish them later. There is, as I indicated, a small number of $46,000 some odd deduct in the supplemental budget. And the reason for that simply is due to personnel turbulence and turnover, we've had several positions that we need to fill and are in the process of filling that have gone unfilled for weeks and several months in a couple of instances. So we're underspending, and therefore that's why that deduct is there. We haven't given up doing anything or what have you. It's just that we've been unable to fill those positions until, in a couple cases, very recently, and there's a couple that still need to be filled that we're interviewing folks for. Personnel turbulence, especially in lower-paying jobs, is a problem. It continues to be a problem. So that's really all I have to report. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Everyone have a nice day. Well,
Secretary of State. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We're on page 174. Begin. Secretary Kemp, good morning.
Good morning. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you all for having us this morning. Lori Smith's joining me, who works on a lot of our budget issues and operating stuff in the Secretary of State's office. I know y'all have a busy agenda, so I'll get right to the point of the amended budget, which I think on the tracking sheet's page 62 in my document. I hope that's the same as you have. First of all, I'd like to thank Governor Deal and the Office of Planning and Budget for their recommendation for additional funding for the Elections Division in the amended budget this year. Certainly over the last several election cycles and with the upcoming 2016 presidential cycle, the workload has continued to increase in the Elections Division with additional open records requests, more coordination and training with the counties, certainly a growing overseas military voting population in the state, as well as issues that we have had to deal with federal court orders. The additional funding on line 42.2.1 on the tracking sheet calls for an increase in the amended budget of $173,119 in state funds. And this basically covers 4 additional positions. One is a junior attorney. One is a HABA/military liaison. As you're well aware, Georgia has a very large military population. This liaison will work specifically to ensure that military and overseas voters know the processes and understand the processes about the ability to register to vote in Georgia, and to also know what they have available to them as far as voting, certainly when they are serving overseas and here in the state. Not only is this needed, I think, in our state, but I also think it's positive for us when you think about future BRAC proceedings in the state. It is just another way that we can serve our bases, and I know you all in the legislature has been for years very supportive of our military men and women and our bases, and the local communities are as well. And I think this is just something else that we can point to that we're doing in Georgia that is pro-military and making sure that all of those that are fighting to protect the freedom for us to be able to vote certainly have that opportunity themselves. And then there would be 2 investigator positions. These additional investigators will work to safeguard the integrity, security, and fairness of the electoral process, as well as do investigative work and look at potential questionable related activity. And these would be dedicated investigators. As you know, the investigators in our office are cross-trained. They do a multiple amount of work with the licensing boards regulating securities and securities cases, and certainly election-related activities. But these 2 investigators would be dedicated resources to the Elections Division, which we feel like would be very important. As you all know, the election laws are very complex and sometimes difficult to understand when you're looking at them for the first time. So we feel like if we have dedicated individuals just to elections, they can focus on that. We can better respond to, election day or early voting activities, and then when there's not an election going on, help with, training with other law enforcement agencies around the state, and certainly working a lot of the state election board cases that we have. Just a quick number for you. Last year, we had 111 state election board cases. So it's quite a lot of them, and as y'all know, some of them are local political issues, and then others are big statewide investigations. So it really runs the gamut. But that's the reason for the request, and we again appreciate the governor and the Office of Planning and Budget in putting it in their budget, and certainly would urge you to support that, and we'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any. The rest of the budget stays the same for us, and we're good with that.
What's your timeline for hiring these 4 new folks?
Well, that was one of the reasons that we wanted to get the money put in the amended budget. As you all know, the presidential primary date will be March 1st, which is going to be another election, early election in 2016. That's one of the reasons we wanted to get this funding in the amended, so we could go ahead and get these investigators hired, and get the liaison working on the military bases, and be able to make sure everybody's trained and ready to go for the cycle. That's why we asked for it in amended versus the big budget.
We have a few questions. Smith or Martin? Chairman Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. It's good this year that we don't see a lot of negatives in your budget. I know last year you went through a lot, and I think all those things got worked out, but we appreciate the hard work that you did in your group.
Thank you.
I don't want to pick at you too much, but to follow up on Chairman Carter's question, when we get these mid-year things, the 4 positions operating at $173,000, what I'm curious of is, and I think what Chairman Carter may have been after is this 3-month salary and operating expenses for these people, or 4 or 2? To annualize this, what's that number going to be?
We figured for the whole 6 months of the.
Okay, so all right, so that's a 6-month thing, even though they may not be doing it. Okay, that's just trying to put that number to right.
And we're glad to give you any follow up on
that's
salaries
just looking for the
time frame and.
Chairman Reinders.
Thank you, Chairman Carter, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. And first of all, I just want to applaud you for what you've done to put Georgia out front and making it relevant in the presidential primary. You've gotten a lot of recognition nationally, not just within this state, but nationally, and it really is a testament to the great leadership that you're showing. Additionally, I think it's important to the members of the committee to know that last year there was a correspondence. We want to make sure that Georgia elections were done right in terms of registration and in terms of access. And we had assured the Secretary that the budget kind of item wouldn't be something that deters us being able to have the most forthcoming and the right way to do the election process. And I just felt for the newer members of the committee, they needed to know that we'd had that kind of correspondence in the past, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Chairman. We had, just very briefly, I felt like we had a great election cycle. Election day was very smooth. The early voting was smooth. Our new online voter registration, we've had over 100,000 Georgians that have registered. Well, we've had 100,000 people that have used the online voter registration process. About half of those registered to vote. The other half changed their record doing something as simple as, changing their address when they moved.
All right. Looks like you did a good job.
Thank you very much, and if anybody needs any follow-up, just let us know, and look forward to working with you the rest of the year. Good luck.
Thank you. All right, next is the Office of the Governor, and we have Teresa McCartney coming to present. We're on page 107.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A little under the weather, so hopefully I can get through this. We really just have two changes, and one change you have seen in a sense for the last 2 years, and it is around moving money out of the governor's emergency fund. We're asking to move $4 million out to put in the Public Defender Standards Council. This is money that we put in for 13 and 14. We now have a better understanding of the needs and want to be able to true up their budget versus moving money out at the end of the fiscal year out of the governor's emergency fund. And you'll see the same type of ad in the 16 budget, and this is really to address the conflict cases that came up a couple of years ago. The other item is within the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. It's approximately $1 million on providing funding for the education task force that the governor is putting together, and you've heard the governor briefly talk about the task force in the state of the state. The task force will have 33 members. I have hired Susan Andrews within my office to lead the staffing of the task force, but as you can imagine, trying to overhaul the funding formulas that have been in place since the mid-'80s is going to be quite a task. I will say that the $1 million, and I hate to say this in a sense, is a guess. Not 100% sure of what the cost will be. We will hold meetings throughout the state because we want to ensure that we have buy-in and feedback from all stakeholders in the state. Depending on the actual cost of what's needed around the task force, and I do assume it will be less than $1 million, that funding will lapse to the Treasury at the end of the fiscal year. And the goal is to have recommendations completed by August of this year, with potential draft legislation to the General Assembly in January. Very short today, so if you have any questions.
Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Chairman Carter. Thank you for being here, and I'll be brief. I can tell you don't feel good just by the body language there. Thank you for being here. The $4 million for the, I mean, I guess I'm uniquely familiar with the struggles the Georgia Public Defender Standards Council have gone through over the years from the time on the Appropriation Committee for Public Safety. The conflict cases, continue to arise because of the way some of the offices were set together. Maybe it's a question for a different place, but has that been worked out over the last couple of years? I mean, the one, the Nichols case was just the disaster that, was the part of the iceberg that just shone out for everyone. But this is just necessary to keep it moving, but it's being addressed.
It is, and we continue to work with the State Bar and the public defenders on ways to address this in the future, and hopefully we can find different options to bring down the cost, because it is quite costly to be able to ensure that we do not have conflicts in these local communities.
Yeah, because I know the State Bar had passed some rules that, again, without me getting into, a lot of semesters shy of a law degree, but they had basically created something that people within the same office, not even the same attorney, couldn't work on a case if there was two people. Is that still the case, that if we have I understand the same attorney can't represent two clients, but they had even said that people within our public defender's office, within the same circuit, same office couldn't. Is that still the case?
Correct.
And what's causing us to go outside in the community to spend money?
It's my understanding that was done in 2010, and the Supreme Court upheld that opinion in 2013. So that's why we're having to put the additional funding in.
And yet private law firms do that all the time. Right? Pick one. King and Spalding has two attorneys. If they draw the Chinese wall, they can represent people. Okay, good enough.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
And the members of the task force should be released today.
Okay.
We do have 10 members of the legislature on the board.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our last agency of the day is the Department of Driver Services. We are on page 85. And our commissioner is coming forward. Appreciate you being here a little early.
Yes, ma'am. My pleasure. I'm on or off?
You're on, but you have to pull it towards you, if you don't mind.
Glad to. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Rob Michael. I'm the Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Driver Services, and with me is Michelle Jordan. She is our Budget Director. For the Governor's recommended budget, the Governor's Office and Office of Planning and Budget has been kind enough to include one increase for us, and that would be for our Sandy Springs office at $60,000. And I can talk about how we would use that, but also about the need. And I can start wherever you want. I guess I'll just start with how we would use it and then talk about the issues we have at that office. So what we would be looking at, our current lease doesn't expire until the end of the fiscal year. So if the $60,000 does come through at the end, we wouldn't be able to use it for the actual lease itself, but what we would hope to be able to do in order to be ready to roll on July 1 is use this for the build out that we would need to do for any center anytime, but particularly this one. I think we are in a good position if the funding for the 2016 budget, which right now the recommendation includes additional funds so that we can move in this office. But that's mostly, I think, about the idea of the rent and what we want to be able to do. Sidetrack myself, but there's already been a market survey done, so I think that we're in a good position to be able to move forward with being able to open as close to July 1 as possible if all goes well on the budget funding side. Obviously, we won't commit a dollar before that occurs. But should that be the case, in order to be open, one of our major renovations is always our counters. And a couple of years ago, we moved away from these custom-built, very nice but heavy-duty wooden counters to a statewide contract where they're not exactly cubes, but they're somewhat like cube material. But in order to place that order, we have to fund 50% ahead of time. And again, if everything were in place and the lease works out, we're able to sign that, we would like to be able to move forward with that. if that sounds reasonable to all of you. So that's where we would go with that part. And I'm ready to answer any questions on that or move forward, just tell you about the need, because I do believe there is a serious need in Sandy Springs for us to enhance our operation.
Chairman Martin.
This one's, not that all of them aren't, but this one's near and dear to me with the troubles in the area up there. So you're talking about moving from that area, or moving from the location you're in sort of a shopping center. You're talking about moving from that shopping center to a different area.
Moving out of the current shopping center, but staying as close to that location as absolutely possible. And the market survey that was done was in that area.
Okay, and the question there is, the question I have, and we can take it offline, but the reason for moving out of that shopping center is you need additional space that you can't get in that shopping center, or
yes,
you don't like the shopping center, or you...
Well, I think it's twofold. The current space we have there is 7,700 square feet. And
got to be more than that. 7,000 square feet?
Sorry, 7,700 square feet.
Okay.
And for that type of volume, what we typically have is a 10,000 to 12,000 square foot facility. I don't know that that's available there. To my knowledge, it is not. But I do think that we would be well served to move to a different location with a different landlord. We have had some different landlord issues, and I think we'd be well served to try to move to a different office.
Okay, and I spoke with somebody else about your landlord issues, and I would, notwithstanding your move here, you're spending good money with the landlord. If the landlord's not performing, I'd hope you either have an attorney in your group or one. And this is what, Madam Chair, I wanted to bring out, because they've put up, from what I understand, with a lot of stuff, and stuff being a highly technical term. You've put up with a lot of things from your landlord that in fact has affected your level of service to the folks, right? In other words,
yes,
you have folks in that office rowing as hard as they can, but something happened to the AC or the power or whatever, and therefore you got people standing in line, which the state takes the hit for, and it's really the landlord.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm encouraging you to do is the state taxpayer money that you spend with that landlord is as good as Chairman Carter's money that she spends in a private lease with a landlord. Somehow people feel like the state just pays no matter what, whereas as an individual, if I wasn't getting service, I'd hold the money back. I would, notwithstanding the fact you want to move, like to see us have a proper conversation about the level of service that our lease required that we did not get. Perhaps that's just me being, wanting to exact the pound of flesh on the way out the door, but I think you've put up with a lot, and I think we should make note that your department catches a lot of grief, sir. I mean, for long lines, and I think it's just fair for people to understand that in this case, some of that wasn't of your making.
Yes, sir.
And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to let folks know that you've put up with a lot there. And whether I think you ought to move or not, I don't know, but I think you should get good service for the money you've paid.
And I so appreciate that support. And we have tried to figure out how we can come back with some sort of pro rata on the times that we have to put people outside and all that. And it's just been very difficult for us to find a way to do it. I totally agree with you, and we look at it every time. But a lot of times, if the landlord falls short, we're able to make connections and get things put back in place so that we would end up spending more money trying to go after a smaller amount of money, and maybe that's not the right answer, but it is absolutely frustrating any way we slice it.
Chairman Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Maybe it's 3 years ago when we instituted the new driver's license as required by federal law. We ran into an employee shortage in Coweta County, Newnan, Georgia, and one of the things I learned through the process is that the people you hire have to have the highest level of security clearance, yet our salary scale isn't commensurate with that requirement. Can you just enlarge on that?
Yes, ma'am. We have, we don't refer to it as security clearance, but what we do is a driver's history, a criminal history, and we do a credit check. And I know a lot of times agencies and businesses don't do a credit check. And we do that, which does sort of separate us a little bit. And the credit check isn't exactly hard and fast. We are able to, especially coming out of a recession, look at unique situations. But it does create some issues for us on the hiring side. But in the 16 budget, again, OPB and the governor's office have been very kind and have put in some numbers there to try to help us kind of level that playing field. So we're excited about that, and we do think that'll have a tremendous impact for us.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you, Mary.
Thank you. And I just want to mention to you, I had a bittersweet emotional moment back in August when I brought my eldest child, who turned 16, 3 days earlier to get her driver's license. And there was, I'm big on customer service. You walk in the door, how may I help you, period. I just think that's crucial.
Yes, ma'am.
Especially in state government. But there was a gentleman by the name of Michael Hancock in the office in Valdosta who went above and beyond to take care of our needs, and he was just incredible, and he should be commended for the customer service he provided me and everyone else I witnessed him provide it to that day. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I thank you for pointing that out. And I don't know everyone in every office, but as I mentioned to you, I do know him, and he is a great employee, and we're very proud of him. And I will make sure the whole agency knows that he was recognized today. And I did have a little handout with some photos of the Sandy Springs office, and I apologize, with your permission, maybe Michelle and I will hand those out. But what these photos are designed to just show you is we have currently 13 counters, and then we have 4 off to the side. And we added these 4 off to the side to try to help us manage the volume that we have at Sandy Springs. But it's difficult to operate with 13 here and 4 there. The manager can't get over there. They're not nearly as secure. Their cash drawers are not nearly as secure. So it shows you that a little bit, or at least that's my intent. And then the other, to give you another idea, is the testing stations there for people taking the written test on the computer. We have 13 stations there, but they're not isolated. They're just kind of there, and it's a big open room. And so I have a picture of the Norcross office to see how we have those testing centers behind sort of glass walls, glass that we can see in there. But the way, if we are able to move, we'll be able to build something more like we have in Norcross, and it really, one, helps the customer be able to focus better, have a better chance of passing the test, and 2, allows us to keep a better eye on them, make sure there's no cheating or anything else like that going on. But with your permission, we'll hand those out.
Sure. Certainly.
Thank you. How many centers do we have statewide? For how
66.
Many? 66.
Yes, sir.
For how many drivers do we have in the state?
How many drivers?
Yeah.
We have 8.1 million records.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
And I actually have that list of each location and in order based on how busy they are, if you are interested in seeing that.
And if I may add, Sandy Springs is our 6th busiest office in the state, and we only expect that to grow.
We're trying to get in the medal count, Madam Chair.
Chairman Martin.
If I can, while the information is getting handed out, I'll offer this. I also talked with someone on your staff and the committee to help me with this too. I don't know if committee members are aware of it. I wasn't aware until last year, and yet I have personally not taken action, that you can register yourself online with the department. And you can tell us maybe a little bit about that. But basically, if you have your driver's license and everything's in order, you can create an online account so that if there is a situation where you lose your driver's license or have it stolen or need to renew, you can do all that online, or much of that online. Is that not true?
Yes, sir, that is.
But if you lose it and you sort of need it to create the account, so we have a situation where if you don't create that account, then you find yourself going to one of these 66 locations. So if you could tell us just a little bit, and then I have asked for that instruction. I'd like to put it on, my website, on a Facebook page, so that we could recommend to Georgians that they go and create that account, so that they wouldn't be, caught flat. As Chairman Smith says, caught flat-footed or inconvenienced. That something they could otherwise do electronically, which will save your folks time and money, and state taxpayer time and money, save them time and money. So, you know, at some point in your presentation, if you could give us a quick look at that, or at the chairman's discretion, maybe at a later date. But I think that's something we could do to help those 8.1 million drivers, so that they didn't have to come see you unless they were absolutely required to.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out, and we're constantly working on more ways to let our audience know the services we have online. As the governor pointed out, we're continuing to grow in population, 8th largest state now in the country. And we are getting more engaged with social media and everything else that we can, and putting more and more services online. We do have an online account. We try to attract people through that by immediately when you create the account and go look at your personal homepage. You can see if you owe any fees for a reinstatement or anything of that nature, how many points you have, and then all the services that are available to that customer. And it shows actually all services that are available, and then grayed out if it's not applicable to that person. And then for the lost license replacement, we do offer that online. And it is an issue for some of our customers, because we ask a security question in order to create the account that requires you to look at the license itself, and if I'm not mistaken, it is the issue date. But it is unique to that license, so that we can just help try to eliminate fraud. But it does create an issue if folks don't do it immediately. The carrier, the sheet of paper that the license is attached to, the permanent card, when we mail it, granted, it has a lot of writing on there. There's a note on it there, just, you know, please retain this, or make sure you know this information so that you can create an account. And we constantly push that account. I believe we're somewhere around 1.5 million accounts right now. So that's growing, but we still have a long way to go. So any way that we can distribute that info, we are grateful for.
Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. You know, when we changed the law and more information was required, we got many people who called our office to say they had either been here for years and never had to produce all that, and either they were married and didn't have the divorce paper, whatever, for whatever reason. But we called your office, and you were trying to help us with that. And I know that you can't personally do that. Who in your office deals with that to try to get those kind of problems solved? Are people who moved here from other states, or they were from abroad and they came here?
It is, quite frankly, a huge number of people, including me, actually. Folks do reach me, and I do try to help them. But the main point of contact for them, if they call, would be our call center. And then if they call and it's something unique, we escalate them up through the process. And let's say it's someone who came from abroad who has legal presence and questions about immigration documents. It may be that we escalate them all the way to our legal department.
Okay. Very
but
good.
I do hope
that was your office. Is that the one out in Conyers? Or
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I do hope those calls have been reduced recently.
They have?
We have had the good fortune of being able to work through the Department of Homeland Security and the governor's office and our board and adjust those rules a little bit to be a little more accommodating, and it's had a tremendous impact on our customers in a most positive way, and I believe from what the constituent issues that we've gotten recently from the legislature have been greatly, greatly reduced.
Great. Thank you.
Yes,
Chairman Smith. Are you? No one else? Okay. Anyone else? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Members, I just want to mention to you, you should have received an email regarding a field trip this afternoon. For any of you who are interested, our great analyst here, Tara, set up 3 visits for us this afternoon. The first one is the State Accounting Office at 1 o'clock. The second one is at 2 at the Department of Administrative Services. The third is at 3, the Department of Audits and Accounting. If you have any interest in just seeing what's going on, we are walking into their offices and going to visit with them, talk to them at a deeper level of what they do, and actually witness what they're doing on site. I would love to do a field trip to most all of our agencies this year. I think that's important for us to see them in action. But anyway, if you would like to join us, we're going to meet at the bottom of Twin Towers, I guess, in the West Tower lobby at 12:45, and we'll all walk up together. They're all three in the same buildings. Or no, the first two are in the one building, then we go to the other tower for the, okay, another, anyway. If you'd like to join us 12:45, the addresses are listed for you in case you want to join us for the 3 o'clock one and not the first two. But anyway, I hope you can. And if there's no more discussion, then the meeting will be adjourned, except that we have economic development starting at 10:30 in the same room.